Okay. All right, then, formally, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Preservation New Jersey's virtual series Talks with Our 10 Most. I'm going to start with just a little bit of housekeeping, if you'll bear with me. My name is Melissa Ziobro, and I am the Director of Public History at Monmouth University in West Long Branch. But tonight I am wearing my Preservation New Jersey board member hat and sitting in for our hardworking executive director, Kelly. So I do want to just give a quick shout out to Kelly and our president, Paul, our education committee chair, Mark, our fabulous office coordinator, Dale, without whom nothing around here would get done, and the rest of the trustees. Everything we do at PNJ is really a team effort. If you're not overly familiar with Preservation New Jersey, just a little bit about the organization. It was founded in 1978 and it is a statewide member-supported nonprofit historic preservation organization that promotes the economic vitality, sustainability, and heritage of New Jersey's diverse communities through advocacy and education. You can learn more about our mission and how you can get involved, maybe taking out a membership, right? Or attending some of our other programming at preservationnj.org. We are perhaps most well known for our 10 most endangered historic places in New Jersey list, which draws attention annually to remarkable sites and to their many challenges. We hope that listing sites on our 10 most endangered list annually is a catalyst for change and really helps them find positive solutions. We'll be announcing this year's 10 most endangered list on May 3rd at the Battleship New Jersey. So stay tuned for more information about that. We do a lot of other programming though. For example, just in February on the 8th, we have an in-person program in Milltown. It's a Historic Preservation Commission roundtable on adaptive reuse and revitalization. February 18th, we've got another virtual program. It'll be our 2025 Historic Preservation Advocacy webinar. February 25th, another virtual program on cemetery preservation planning. So lots going on. Again, you can find all of that information and more on our website, preservationnj.org. So on to tonight's program. Preservation New Jersey ventured into virtual programming, as so many organizations did during the pandemic, with a skills-based series, Q&A with PNJ. And, coming now 5 years on, we've kept up with the virtual programming as a nice way to reach people in the comfort of their own home. And we've actually added this series, Talks with Our 10 Most, which looks back at past 10 most endangered sites to look at the many successes they've had and maybe some of the challenges they still face. So tonight we are here with David Overacre, who is the president of the Board of Trustees for the Vought House. The Vought House, built in 1759 by Christoffel Vought, is on the National Register of Historic Places for its connection to events of the American Revolution and its architectural significance. Most significant are the original ornamental plaster ceilings throughout the main floor, including a unique motif of a coiled serpent that adorns the ceiling in the center hall. But David is far better to tell you about the Vought House than me, so let me end it there and turn it over to David. Let me find him here so I can give him the hosting powers, and then we'll be good to go. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. There we go. Let me share my screen and get situated here.
And just so everybody knows, at the end of David's prepared remarks, we will then move into Q&A. So be sure to take good notes.
All right, quick check. Everybody can see my screen here now?
Looks great.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here to talk about the Vought House tonight. We have a real cultural gem here in Hunterdon County, and I'm glad to be able to give an update on our preservation progress. But our mission is about so much more than just saving an historic building. It's really about enriching our understanding of our nation's history through the story of the Vought family. So the first half of my talk, I'll cover the family story, and in the latter half, I'll delve into our restoration progress and where we're headed in the next year or two. So real quick about our organization, we're a nonprofit founded in 2006. We're a very, very small organization, just 6 of us on the board of trustees. We're all volunteers. We have no paid staff. So we literally do everything from mowing the lawn to filing federal taxes to preparing and submitting grant applications and managing, grant awards and the restoration work and so on and on. So, we've been in a sort of perpetual state of running on fumes financially, but the board over the years has managed to keep it together by, through a combination of public funding and generous private donations. Our property is the Christoffel Vought farmstead. We acquired it in 2012. It's right near the intersection of Route 31 and Route 78 in Hunterdon County, right next door to the lovely town of Clinton. As Melissa mentioned, we're on the National Register. We actually met all 4 criteria for selection, so we checked all 4 boxes here. The house is associated with significant events, associated with significant people. The building itself is architecturally significant, and the property informs about life in 18th century rural New Jersey. And I'll touch on each of these points as we go through the presentation tonight. So I'll start the story of the Vought family with their migration from their homeland in the Palatinate region of what's now southwestern Germany. The people here suffered through decades of war and economic hardship and religious persecution, and Queen Anne of England threw these people a lifeline. She offered transportation and economic support to any Palatines willing to relocate to the English colonies. So Simon and Christina Vought were among the many who leapt at the opportunity, made their way to London, and boarded British ships bound for New York and other ports. So Simon and Christina arrived in New York in 1710. And this really marks the beginning of what would be a long period of steady migration of German-speaking people into New Jersey and other colonies. Sorry, I'm going to pause here for a moment because I see people in the waiting room. Melissa, do I need to?
Yes, David, as we discussed, unfortunately, when I made you the host, that means you have to let the people in. Do you know? Can you do that?
I'm looking here. I see participants. I don't actually know how to do that. How do I let them in? Oh, waiting room admit. Here we go. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Here we go. Okay, I'll keep doing this as we go through. All right, sorry, folks. So I just admitted folks in the waiting room. Okay, so Simon and Christina Vought arrived 1710. This is kind of the beginning of, a very large, prolonged wave of migration of German people into New Jersey. The Voughts stay in New York for about 2 years, and then they move with 40 or so other German Lutheran families to the lower Raritan River Basin in New Jersey, about in the vicinity of where Millstone is today. And Christoffel Vought, the namesake of our homestead, is born in 1714, and he's baptized at the very first German Lutheran service held in New Jersey. In about 20 years, the Vought family moves to the settlement of New Germantown. This village we know today as Oldwick, and it would become the epicenter of a very sizable German-speaking population in northern Hunterdon County, with satellite communities that would pop up in the surrounding area. So the Vought's arrived sometime around 1735. Christopher marries in 1749, and they have their first son, John, in 1750. In 1759, Christopher buys 285 acres of prime farmland and builds the stone homestead that we have today. So the family tree is quite large. I'm going to keep the focus just on these four individuals to keep it, crisp for tonight. So I'll talk about Christoffel Vought, who built the house, his wife Cornelia, and their son John and his wife Mary. So Christopher, I mentioned, built the house 1759. It was, quite an impressive house. So he obviously was, doing quite well already by then. And the family is rising in prominence as they're growing their farm operation. In 1767, Christopher was elected church elder of the Zion Lutheran Church in New Germantown. I'll talk more about this position, but this was really a position that was, it was held for the most highly respected members of the congregation. So it was a real position of prominence within the church. In 1768, Christopher is appointed Hunterdon County Road Commissioner. And obviously the farming operation is doing well because by 1773, he's able to expand the farm with acquisition of 203 acres adjacent to the original parcel. And by this time, it's really a family farming operation. John is old enough to, be participating in managing the farming operation as well. John Vought is elected township clerk, Lebanon Township clerk in 74 and 75. So, father and son have roles of prominence within the community. These positions would have brought him into contact with other prominent figures within Hunterdon County. So sorry, let me pause. I see some folks trying to get in here. Give me one moment. I thought I did, maybe not. I don't see anybody waiting. Okay. So in 1775, Christopher is now 61 years old. John is 25 years old. With the Battle of Lexington in April, has put an end to any hope of reconciliation with Great Britain. And meanwhile, here in New Jersey, the Patriot faction is established in the New Jersey Provincial Congress, and they meet in Trenton in May of 75. About a year later, Royal Governor William Franklin is arrested, June 76. And on July 2nd, 76, the New Jersey Provincial Congress adopts a constitution declaring independence from Great Britain. Coincidentally, the very same day, the Continental Congress voted in favor of independence. But meanwhile, here in New Jersey, the population is very much divided. There's no hard figures here, but the general consensus is that the population was about evenly split three ways. So about 1/3 Patriot, 1/3 Loyalist, and the remaining third, quote unquote, disaffected. So what's interesting here and surprising to many people is that actually a significant minority of the population were, supporting the Patriot cause. And this division was very apparent here locally, with John Vought over this period of time, really, playing the role of a loyalist activist. He's refusing to turn out for training of the Patriot militia, and he's fined for doing so. He and his ally Joseph Lee are kind of taking the same position as far as resisting this movement towards independence. And meanwhile, the Vought's neighbor Thomas Jones is an ardent patriot. So he's a tavern keeper next door to the Vought's homestead. He's a Hunterdon County delegate to the New Jersey Provincial Congress, and he's a captain in the Patriot Militia. So this is a perfect example of the division here. You have two prominent community members, they're neighbors, and they've taken opposite sides on the question of independence. So local tensions erupt here on the evening of June 24th, 76, when John Vought and his ally Joseph Lee lead a mob attack. A mob of about 24 loyalists armed with clubs attack Jones Tavern next door. They arrive at night. This mob enters the building. There's quite a violent confrontation inside the tavern. Thomas Jones, gets his gun to defend himself and threatens to, quote unquote, blow their brains out. This mob falls on Jones and beats him quite badly. He does manage to escape, but the mob then turns on his wife, threatens Captain Jones' wife to turn him over. The mob breaks open the tavern bar and steals the cash inside, and then they ultimately disperse. So the provincial Congress promptly orders an arrest for this mob of quote unquote insurgents on the grounds that they have publicly declared that they'll take up arms on the behalf of Great Britain, and that they've plundered and robbed the house of Captain Jones. And they order the militia to round up these insurgents. It's interesting rhetoric here, right? Here you have the rebel Congress essentially calling the Loyalists the insurgents. So it's sort of an interesting, perspective here from the Patriot viewpoint. And what's not shown here on the slide is an attachment here lists the suspects to be rounded up, and John Vought is at the top of the list. So he's viewed as the ringleader, and he's sort of enemy number one on the list to be captured. So thankfully, we have a firsthand account of a member of the arresting party. So we know that the Patriot militia marches to the Vought House. They surround the house. About midnight, the colonel raps on the door with his sword, and Christoffel Vought tries to escape. He jumps out a back window, and he's caught in his night clothes and thrown to the ground and bound. So, it's midnight, it's late, the militia's marched, caught their man. They don't want to march at night, so they decide, let's see what's inside the house. So they raid the house, they look for food and drink. They go down the cellar, they find a boiled ham and some bread and butter. And lucky for them, they find a barrel of metheglin, which is a very, very early honey-based alcoholic beverage, very ancient recipe. It's basically a spiced mead. So these Patriot soldiers tap that keg of metheglin and they drink. And the witness here says that, quote, the men had the bees buzzing in their heads all day and even at nightfall. So the militia party wakes up in the morning with their hangover and marches Christopher to the jail in Trenton. John Vought was not caught. He hears of his father's arrest and turns himself in. And the two men, father and son, are held in jail for about 2 weeks and released on bail and charged and fined 100 pounds. So soon after the release, John and Christopher decide it's time to fully commit to the British cause. And by December 76, John Vought and his ally Joseph Lee have rounded up about 85 local loyalists, and they ride off to New Brunswick to join British forces. So they join the New Jersey Volunteers, which is the provincial loyalist force of the British Army. They're also referred to as the Skinner's Greens, after Cortlandt Skinner, who was the loyalist who raised this unit. And they wore green uniforms, hence the name Skinner's Greens. So Joseph Lee and John Vought are commissioned in the 1st Company, 6th Battalion. Joseph Lee is captain and John Vought is his lieutenant. And meanwhile, at the same time, Captain Thomas Jones is headed in the other direction. He's one of the few that is tasked with rounding up the boats up and down the Delaware to defend Washington's retreat from the British forces. So John and Christopher are stationed on Staten Island. Presumably Christopher is too old to actually, take up arms, but we know John is billeted on a farm in the vicinity of Richmond. We know that his wife Mary joins him in 77. In August of 77, John's unit sees action defending against the Patriot raid led by Sullivan on Staten Island. By July of 78, John has been promoted to captain in the 2nd Battalion, and we know from his service record when he's claiming compensation after the war that he saw duty in both the northern, meaning New Jersey, and the southern campaigns throughout the course of the Revolution. So meanwhile, the women of the household are enduring significant hardship. The men have rode off to fight for the British, and meanwhile, Cornelia Vought is 66 years old. Her daughter-in-law Mary is only 22, and they're left behind to run a nearly 500-acre farmstead with two enslaved servants. This was very much a man's world at the time, so these women no doubt encountered significant obstacles trying to keep this farming operation running. In October of 77, the New Jersey Council of Safety calls the wives of Hunterdon Loyalists to appear to basically explain why they shouldn't be removed from their homes and sent across enemy lines. We know Cornelia appears, Mary does not. She's presumably still on Staten Island with her husband. But the council ultimately decides these women are not a threat and allows them to stay in their homes. So Cornelia gets a bit of a reprieve here, but in early 78, the provincial Congress passes legislation allowing Hunterdon county commissioners to seize the property of Loyalists. So a jury of inquisition is held in the case of Christopher and John Vought at Jones Tavern, sorry. And they're found guilty. And the Vought family, all their livestock is seized and auctioned, and the property is leased to Cornelia's son from her prior marriage. So Cornelia yet again gets a bit of a reprieve here, only because their son is able to hold the lease on the property so she can stay in her home. By December 78, all of the personal effects of the family are seized, the contents of the home and the outbuildings are seized and sold. And then the final blow is April 79, when the real estate is auctioned to a patriot at Jones Tavern. And at this point, the Vought family is forced to vacate their beautiful homestead once and for all. So 1783, the war ends with the Treaty of Paris, and the Loyalists are exiled from the new United States. So the Voughts join, many thousands of Loyalists who set sail for Nova Scotia, and they stay there for 9 years. They do ultimately return to the new United States, but they never return to their homestead in New Jersey. They sail back and sail up the Hudson River to the area of Albany, New York, to 2,000 acres of land that they own there. So it's kind of amazing, really, that given the level of commitment that John Vought gave to fighting for the crown, that they were able to ultimately return to the United States and kind of reconcile and reestablish themselves in the United States and carry on. So there's a lot more to tell about the Vought family story, but in the interest of time, I'll end it here, and I'll turn over to talk about the house itself and our restoration efforts. So this is the Christoffel Vought homestead. You can see what it looked like in 2012 when we acquired the property, and fast forward to today, where we've made a lot of progress with removing a lot of modern additions to reveal the original 18th century building. We definitely have a long way to go, both on the exterior and the interior, but we've definitely made some progress based, from where we started here. The original 18th century building here is a very typical Germanic style of dwelling called a bank house, so named because it's built into the bank of a hillside. But this bank house is adapted with Georgian architectural influences, such as chimneys on the gable ends and a center hall with symmetry in the floor plan. So the building really reflects the kind of merging of cultures taking place at the colonies at this time, with this merging of Germanic building form with English Georgian architectural influences. Want to talk about our many partners before I talk about the building itself. We've just couldn't get where we've gotten today without so many incredible partners. On the preservation side, eclectic architecture, we've had Michael Margulies as our consulting architect from the very beginning. He was the author of our preservation plan. And a couple of recent projects I'll talk about. We've had Preservation Works as a contractor. They're a really excellent outfit out of Easton, PA that have done amazing work on our ceilings. And Heritage House Rights out of Bangor, PA has done some carpentry work for us on recent projects. On the funding side, we're so incredibly grateful to so many agencies, the National Park Service, the New Jersey Historic Trust, New Jersey Cultural Trust, the New Jersey Historical Commission, and last but not least, Hunterdon County and our County Culture and Heritage Commission. We're just so incredibly grateful to these funding agencies for their support over the years, and I'll talk about some of the recent projects that these agencies have supported for us. So probably, as far as architectural significance, the most important elements of the house would probably be the wattle and daub construction of the walls and ceilings and the original plaster ceiling decorations. So this slide here shows a floor plan of a plan view of the ceiling decorations on the main floor, showing 4 unique ceiling decorations here. Very, very fine craftsmanship here. These are all created by hand with profile tools and little jig fixtures to control the, creation of these geometries, really beautiful geometric patterns. Also extraordinarily rare is the wattle and daub construction of the walls and ceilings. This is a very, very ancient building fabric form. It's early precursor to the lath and plaster system that would come many years later. The method here entails first constructing essentially panels of woven sticks between the framing members, and then packing those woven panels with a wet clay mixture. So the process here starts with constructing the woven panels first by assembling these cross pieces called staves that are interlocked into the framing members, and then taking long slender branches and weaving them over and under the staves to construct basically a woven lattice of sticks. And that's the wattle in the system that basically serves as the lath. And then you take a mixture of clay right out of the ground mixed with water and lime and maybe a little bit of sand, and most importantly, some grassy reinforcement like straw or hay. You pack that wet clay mixture into the woven sticks, pack it from both sides, and once that clay mixture fully cures, you basically have 4-inch thick brick walls and ceilings reinforced with sticks. So it's an incredibly strong, incredibly durable system. The only difference, unlike brick, this clay mixture is actually a reversible process. So if you add water to the cured clay, it'll actually reconstitute itself into the wet form. So unfortunately, it doesn't bode well for roof leaks, which you'll see we were a victim of in a upcoming slide. But as long as there's no water exposure, it's an incredibly durable system. So you can see here on the lower right a picture of an area of the ceilings here where we've got some daub that's a void in the daub where you can see the exposed sticks. Thanks to generous funding from the New Jersey Historic Trust, we completed a grant recently with our friends from Preservation Works. They did some really excellent work doing a really comprehensive investigation of the original daub in the building. And they experimented with a variety of recipes for clay daub that were best in terms of composition and curing performance. And they were able to do a sort of a proof of concept pilot of a repair of this void in the ceiling that we had in the building. So you can see here the preparation of the wet clay. They make basically these balls of clay that you can then move up into the building. And on the right there, you can see it being packed into the void. And then you can see the end result here, the area circled in red, where that void has been completely filled with the clay material and then skim coated with a skim coating of lime plaster. What I didn't mention about the wattle and daub and the plaster decorations is, once you've set your base clay on the walls and ceilings, the ornamental decorations were then also created with a similar finer clay mixture to create the profiles of these decorations. And then the final finish on all the walls and ceilings was a very fine lime plaster finish that gave you a nice clean finished look to the walls and ceilings. So this proof of concept was the conclusion of this historic trust grant. It was an investigation grant that would enable us to really establish the methodology for doing these repairs throughout the rest of the house. So the next major project with the ceilings was funded by the New Jersey Cultural Trust. This work was again conducted by our friends from Preservation Works. One of the problems here was we had a lot of areas of sagging of the wattle structure in the ceilings. So Preservation Works came up with a really clever system here to essentially suspend the ceilings throughout the entire attic from overhead. So they installed 2x3 cross members throughout the entire attic level, cross pieces between the timber joists. And then it's a little bit hard to tell, but if you look in the upper right photo here, you can see these turnbuckles, these adjustable turnbuckles that they connected with screw eyes to connect the 2x3s to the cross pieces, the staves in the wattle structure, the stick structure in the ceilings. So we basically have, several hundred points of suspension connecting the ceiling to these 2x3 cross pieces that are secured to the framing members. So it's a really clever system. It gave us really fine control of the tension on these turnbuckles to stabilize these ceilings and prevent any further motion of the ceiling so that we can proceed to do the repairs of the ceilings without having to worry about any further sagging or cracking once we complete our repairs. Another huge element of this New Jersey Cultural Trust grant was to clean the lime plaster surface on the interior and the main floor. So Preservation Works spent, many, many hours meticulously removing many layers of, decades of accumulated layers of modern paint coatings and gypsum coatings that had really obscured some of the fine details in the original 18th century ornamental decorations here. So you can see a picture here, kind of the final product of all that cleaning effort in the largest room on the main floor. This is the parlor, we call it. You can see really nice detail in the decoration. At the far end of the room here, you can see where we've lost a fairly, significant area of ceiling there. This was associated with a roof leak back in the beginning before we even acquired the property. So that's a pretty major area of repair that we need to address in future work. Another ceiling here, a different decoration here post cleaning in another room on the main floor. By far, though, the most significant feature in the building, for sure, is the famous serpent motif, the serpent decoration on the formal center hall on the main floor. So it's quite a dramatic feature to see. You walk in the main entry to the formal entry to the building, the visitor looks up and sees this serpent's head looking down at them. So on the left view here, this is the view that you see as you're standing in the formal entry to the building looking up. On the right is from the opposite end of the hall. So you see the tail of the serpent up here in the foreground. And in the center there, you see a detailed view of the head of the serpent. And this is showing actually preservation works in the process of doing the cleaning of the decoration there, and they've really revealed some really beautiful detail in the head of the serpent that had been obscured. It was not really visible with all the accumulations over the years and all the gypsum that had been accumulated over these details. So we're really, really excited about this to get this detail in the head of the serpent, the eyes and the face there that were sort of obscured beforehand. So we just finished this New Jersey Cultural Trust grant just at the end of December last year. And we're really excited to proceed with our restoration work from here and continue to do the restoration of these walls and ceilings. You know, this feature here is the one that gets most people excited when they see the building, and it always evokes a lot of oohs and ahs and questions. We always get questions about, you know, why a serpent, and honestly, it's a complete mystery to us. It's you know, we can't ask Christopher why he, you know, decided to have this decoration put on his center hall. But I'll offer up a couple of possibilities as food for thought. Um, so why a serpent? Well, in 1754, Benjamin Franklin publishes his famous Join or Die cartoon. 20 years later, this imagery would be adopted as a symbol of American independence, but that was not at all the message, the original message here. The intent of Franklin's article here was to emphasize the importance of the colonies uniting and defending British territory against the threat posed by the French and their Indian allies. So the message was really that the colonies needed to play a larger role in defending British interests on the frontier. And that message was so popular that Franklin's article was republished in a number of colonial newspapers. So, you know, notice the date here, 1754, is only 5 years before Christopher builds his house. So it opens up the intriguing possibility that Christopher's serpent could have been inspired by this message of colonial unity. You know, is it within the realm of possibility? Sure. My personal opinion is it's probably pretty unlikely, but certainly intriguing nonetheless to think that, you know, there might be a connection here. You know, another possibility, personally, I think probably more likely, is that it's a religious symbol. I mentioned Christopher Vought, his position as church elder. His role as church elder was to assist the pastor in providing spiritual counseling to the congregation. So he obviously had a very deep connection to his Lutheran faith. There's an interesting duality of meaning in serpent symbol usage in the Bible. In fact, that duality of meaning, you know, spans many cultures and many religions. But in the example of the Bible, you have, you know, the serpent can represent good and life and healing, or on the other hand, it can represent, you know, evil and death and harm. So you have, you know, as an example, of course, the serpent in the story of Adam and Eve represents evil and temptation. But then you have the story of the bronze serpent, where God delivers judgment by sending a plague of poisonous snakes on the Israelites, and those who look upon a serpent held on a pole by Moses are granted God's mercy and live. So in this example, the serpent symbolizes salvation. So, you know, again, it's purely speculation, but given Christopher's connection to his faith, you know, it's certainly a possibility that he chose to have this serpent as a symbol, as a religious symbol. Purely speculation. I think, you know, what's so wonderful about our serpent ceiling is the mystery surrounding it, and the fact that, you know, Christopher obviously put that on his ceiling. He wanted it to be a conversation piece when he built the house, and here, you know, more than 250 years later, it's still a conversation piece, and it still prompts lots of questions and discussion and interest in the building. So um, it's kind of a fun focal point for us, for visitors who come to the building.
Hey, David, can I trouble you for a sec just to check if there's anyone in the waiting room? I'm seeing a message in the chat that there might be.
Oh, sure. I apologize. I think I do see somebody waiting
Thank you so
to.
much.
Let's see if I can find that. So I see participants. I don't see anybody waiting.
Okay, if you scroll up to the top of the participant list, it's possible they dropped off.
Looks like yeah, I don't see anybody at the top waiting to
Okay,
admit. So,
thank you for checking.
okay, sorry about that. Okay, so switching gears here to other projects. Another great project with support from the New Jersey Historic Trust. We did a really great archaeology project under the floorboards in the cellar kitchen. Um, we had Dr. Philippi from Hofstra University Center for Public Archaeology oversaw this study, divided up the cellar kitchen into sections and sifted through, and we found a really incredible number of artifacts. Way too much to pack on the slide, so I'm just kind of showing you just to give you a flavor of, the quantity and the variety of things that were found. It was really quite surprising, even for the archaeologist. We found all kinds of buttons, various types of buckles, lots of sewing and apparel related implements. We found jewelry. Probably most surprising, the lower right, we found some um, projectile points. So an arrowhead and a broad spear point that, according to Dr. Philippi, are at least 1,000 years old, probably older. So those two are a real mystery. How on earth those would have gotten into the cellar of the building. Were they unearthed during the original excavation? We just have no way of knowing. So amazing finds there. I think also rather interesting in terms of context was the number of kind of leisure related artifacts that were found. On the top left here, we found slate pencil fragments. Lower left here, lots of clay pipe fragments. And on the lower right, children's playing marbles. So, this was surprising, given the fact that cellar kitchens were really, intentionally kind of segregated to be, really workspaces, utilitarian domestic workspaces. Here you find things associated with leisure activities in the cellar kitchen, which was, somewhat unusual perhaps. And it really kind of brings a human element to our project here, because you're able to kind of imagine, you know, children doing schoolwork in the cellar kitchen and playing with marbles while adults are relaxing and smoking a pipe. So it's kind of fun variety of artifacts here. It was really, really an amazing study, and we're looking forward to really sifting through the final report we just received from Dr. Philippi just about a week and a half ago. So another great project here supported by New Jersey Historic Trust. As far as new grant awards, we're incredibly grateful. We just late last year were notified of awards from the New Jersey Historic Trust for Historic Site Management Grant, Hunterdon County. Through the Open Space Fund, we won a grant award for historic preservation for construction of the cellar windows and doors and the exterior stairs. The big one, though, for us, the real game changer, is this National Park Service Grant Award that the grant period just started last quarter. This is a 3-year grant period, more than 600,000 in funding. So incredibly grateful here. It was really a long shot for us when we applied, and so it was just incredible for us to win this award. So, this grant, in conjunction with the prior two that I mentioned, really dovetail nicely in terms of positioning us to really move this restoration forward in a big way. And really be able to accomplish in a, few years what would probably have taken us, well over a decade or, a dozen years without this NPS funding. So the scope is quite enormous. We're, essentially going to be able to complete the restoration of the 18th century core of the building for the most part with the funding from these three agencies. So I'll kind of skim through the architectural plans here, but this is just kind of a highlight of what's coming this year is construction of the windows and doors in the building to seal the building envelope. So these are the architectural drawings for that. We're even more excited about reconstructing the original entry stairs and the portico, which are currently non-existent on the building. This was all removed and the original grade excavated to build additions on the building. So this is all lost to time. So this is sort of a concept design of what the entry stairs and portico might have looked like. And we're really, really excited to get this construction started this year as well. So as far as our plans for the 250th, we have 3 events on the calendar. We have there's an organization at the county level that's sort of spearheading the organization of all the sites countywide here to organize the calendar of events for all the sites in the county. So we have these 3 dates reserved on the calendar for the celebration of our 250th. We have Living History Day in September of this year. The big one, though, for us will be in June of 26, when we're going to have a reenactment of the attack on Jones Tavern and the arrest at the Vought House. We're going to have the 100th Symphony playing at the Clinton Township Middle School, and so we'll have some activities at the middle school and then move over to the Vought Homestead property for the reenactment. And then finally, in late 2026, we have another event at the Clinton Township Middle School with the 100th Symphony. So that's the end of my presentation here. I want to thank everybody for hearing about the history of the Vought family and about our restoration effort and our progress. I would just ask everybody to please follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our newsletter. If anybody has any questions or wants to follow up afterwards, you can certainly reach me. My email's here. It's easy. It's president@voughthouse.org. And I will pause there for any questions.
Bravo, David. Clapping is always a little awkward in the virtual environment, but that was such a thorough overview. Thank you so much. It is truly inspirational what you've been able to accomplish there with volunteer power. I mean, really. Let me, if I may, read you some questions from the chat. Does that work for you?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay, we'll start with that. So Robert asks, do you know of any other historic homes that use a wattle and daub construction?
I don't personally. I know it's very, very rare. I know that in the past, our organization has always pointed to a representative example of our decorative ceilings as one that's now installed in the oh, what the heck is the museum down in
It's Winterthur.
Winterthur? Thank you, Don. Yeah, that's right. So are there no wattle and daub buildings in the United States? I don't know that we can say that, but they're few and far between, to say the least. They're very, very rare.
I would cite the one that pops to mind for me is local in Monmouth County, Parker Homestead 1665. For anyone that is interested in another Jersey example, you can find them easily by Googling them, but certainly very, very rare. This is kind of a follow-up question to that one, David. It's from Kenna. Did they source any clay from adjacent local land?
We did a very tiny sourcing from the property, yes, but we are constrained on that front. So, for the most part, we're sourcing clay elsewhere that's representative. But that's a really good question because, I mean, obviously at the time of construction, it came right out of the ground, right on the property, of course. I mean, and the same goes for the wattle and daub. I mean, that's what's kind of amazing about this is that, they literally built from what was right there on the ground in front of them. They used the slender branches from the trees they felled to hew the beams for the building, and they drew the clay from the ground and they sourced lime, as close as possible to prepare that clay lime mixture and the lime plaster. So yeah, good question there.
There's some discussion in the chat about the recording. So today's session is being recorded and it will be available on Preservation New Jersey's YouTube channel for those of you who are asking. Here is a question in the chat from Robert. Did either Christopher or John have to take an oath of allegiance to New York when they re-entered the United States?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I can't say I have any idea. Don, you may know
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, I would say I don't think so. I mean, if you look on the website, there's under documents, there's the article that I wrote. What was it, a year ago? July of 2023 in New Jersey Studies, and they it's what's kind of amazing is how much they were welcomed back into society in in Albany, because I mean it was less than a decade since he had taken up arms and fought. It's only a decade or so after the war that they
Yeah,
were welcomed by patriots who had also been on the outside.
yeah, I think
So
what's kind
it's
of amazing, sort
yeah,
of along the same thread, is Christopher's descendant ended up fighting in the War of 1812 for the United States.
right.
So it's kind of cool
The,
there that a descendant here ended up fighting for the United States in the War of 1812. So
right, yeah, the grandson who was born on Staten Island just before they left, before the British relocated them. And speaking of descendants, I should mention also that we have Christoffel Vought here, who's also a descendant and namesake of the man who built the house. He's on the Zoom call. So
that's
hey guys,
truly amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
There's actually a question in the chat about whether any of the Vought descendants sided with the British during the War of 1812, but your evidence shows that descendants sided with the Americans.
Yeah, that we
No,
do
that
know.
they
Yeah, go ahead.
that they sided with the British as when they joined the New Jersey Volunteers, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
but as far as the 1812, they sided with the U.S., right?
oh,
So
yeah, I'm sorry, in 1812, yes.
that we do know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha. Question from Kenna in the chat. Who is reproducing the windows and doors?
Well, that's an open question. That's out for bidding now, so stay tuned. We'll be announcing bid awards fairly soon. Yep, that's these are our will be funded by our new grants, thanks to Hunterdon County and the National Park Service. So coming soon.
That's why everyone needs to follow you on social media.
That's right. That's the best place to get the latest, greatest news is Facebook for sure. Yep. Or our newsletter, which we do, every 3 months or so, a newsletter goes out with updates as well.
Another one from the chat. Why do the Vought's leave Canada and return to the US?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think, Christopher, I mean, who built the house, I mean, he was a native of the colonies, right? He was born in New Jersey. So I think at the end of the day, even though he was committed to the Loyalist cause and his son was just as committed and, took up arms for the crown, I think ultimately they felt like this was their homeland and probably felt, I mean, this is my speculation, right? But, presumably they wanted to return to what they thought of as their homeland. They also owned 2,000 acres in upstate New York, which was clearly attractive to return to. So, I mean, those two factors for sure would have led them back from rather cold and frosty Nova Scotia back to a more moderate climate in Albany, New York. I don't know, Don, if you have any other insight there, but that's sort of my
Yeah.
assumption.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Okay, Stephanie asks, was a finishes investigation performed on the ceiling before all of the paint layers removed? If so, are you planning on recreating those finishes?
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent question. I didn't touch on that, but that was a part of that New Jersey Historic Trust grant where I talked about preservation works, doing the experimentation with the dog preparation formula. So, that was another fairly significant component of that grant. That was a lot of content to cover. But yes, we had a conservator do a, very, very thorough paint analysis. There's a pretty comprehensive report just on that, that was very detailed. And we had our conservator come in again. Michael Margulies had brought him in again recently, like within the last 6 months, to kind of revisit, and just in the context of removing the modern layers of paint and the gypsum, to ensure that everybody was sort of aligned on the approach there, and that yes, in fact, it was appropriate that we were removing modern materials. So yeah, excellent question. We do have that documented and completed. And yes, we do intend to try to replicate, the original finishes. We want to have a representative original lime plaster finish on all these walls and ceilings as it would have been in 1759.
Here's a question from Rob. What's the next step in construction?
Next step, the priorities for us is really sealing the building envelope. So I showed the drawings of all the windows. So, getting the rest of the windows installed to seal the building envelope, that's really critical. The other priority for us this year is to get those entry stairs constructed. And then we're prioritizing the main floor. We want to, at least in time for 2026, have the main floor done as much as possible, so that we can have an event, we can have people visit the site, they can walk up the stairs and enter through the formal entry on the main living level, and see the main living level as it was originally. So those are our priorities. And then sort of second tier priorities is to then move through the rest of the interior. Cellar's lower priority for obvious reasons, but that is in scope with our grant funding that we have, is to also fully restore the cellar kitchen. And then ultimately finish with installation of environmental controls, HVAC, heating and cooling and humidity controls in the building. So, this year is really windows and doors and the entry stairs is our top priority.
Eric asks, is the nearby middle school built on the Vought property?
It was actually part and parcel of one large, farm property. Yeah. So, and that's a whole story in and of itself, sort of the early story here of, how we came to own this building started with the Board of Ed purchasing the old farm with the intent of building a middle school. And this building came along with the farm. And, I don't think that anybody realized at the time that there was a incredible 18th century building underneath all this. It was sort of a monstrosity of a building with all these modern additions attached to the entire exterior. But yes, it was part of a larger farm, and so this was parceled off of that Board of Ed property that now is the Clinton Township Middle School.
Michelle asks, are there any concerns about your plans with the uncertainty of federal funding of late?
Oh my gosh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, sweating bullets to say the least. You know, I haven't heard anything yet from the MPS as far as any, our grant award being in any jeopardy, but I think that's a little bit of a wild card to say the least. I mean, thankfully we've got Hunterdon County has given us some funding, so at least we can do something this year. It's going to allow us to get started with windows and constructing the stairs. But yeah, it's a big question mark that we're going to be obviously keeping a close eye on, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we receive the full funding and receive it on time. What I can say is that we've already submitted our part one review package. I've divided up the project into a part one and a part two as far as the scope of the MPS project work, and the part one package has already been submitted to NPS actually back in November. So it's still sitting with them. So we're eagerly awaiting, a response on their review of that part one package. So we haven't heard anything yet about that package being at any risk.
Did the walls of the rooms have color when Christoffel Vought lived there? And will you restore those colors at some point?
Yeah, that's been a ongoing question. I'm hesitant to say one way or the other. There, there are a number of areas where there's a really nice light blue color that people have wondered if that could have been an original. You know, I'm, I would, my gut is probably based on what I've heard from Rob at Preservation Works. You know, if I recall correctly, his gut instinct was that the original color was sort of a light buff tan color. You know, again, I think we need to really dig on the paint analysis and regroup with the conservator as far as what, you know, finish colors there might have been. But I think the experts are leaning towards sort of just a uniform buff tan color throughout with no, color differentiating any features. So I think that's, you know, probably the direction we're going to go. But again, it's really going to be informed by the expert, recommendation of the conservator and Preservation Works, who has done a lot of the, work to look at the layers of these finishes that are in the building. You know, I think at the end of the day, we want to make our best informed decision as to what the finish should look like on the interior, just like everything else we're doing as far as preservation.
Was there any use immediately prior to the Board of Ed acquisition?
Oh yeah, in fact, there was a resident of the building, I think, right up till, into 2005. So right up until the Board of Ed acquired it, there was I believe it was a tenant renting. So it was occupied, certainly. And, once the Board of Ed occupied or, took acquisition of the property, obviously the tenant had to vacate. So, I think the problems, so to speak, with the buildings arose in the interim, right? Because the Board of Ed acquired the farm in 2005, and it took us all the way until 2012 to take acquisition of the building. And in that time period, and sometime early on there, I guess it was probably 2006 timeframe, the building was mothballed. So, these buildings aren't really meant to be, you know, mothballed like that, where you have absolutely no environmental controls, no heat, no humidity controls or anything, and that takes a toll on the interior finishes. And then of course we had the problem with the roof, the leaking roof. But yeah, it was occupied right up till 2005, as far as I understand.
Okay, well, we have gone through all of the questions in the chat. Did anyone else have a question for David? Okay, I don't see anyone unmuting or raising their hand. So I think that was a lovely, robust Q&A. Thank you so much, David, for that great talk. I mean, really just so thorough and so engaging, and I can't wait to see what successes you have in your future. Any closing remarks from you, David?
No, I just want to thank everybody for attending. Thanks for the interest in our project. We're really enthusiastic with the good fortune we've had just last year with new grant awards, and I want to thank Preservation New Jersey for hosting this. I no doubt us being listed on the top 10 back in 2010, made a difference as far as bringing attention to the importance of our property way back in the beginning. And I do want to acknowledge the Vought descendants that are on the call. It's kind of, it gives me chills to know we've got whatever sixth or whatever generation descendants here that are still following us. We have other Voughts following us on Facebook, which is really cool. So thank you, everybody, and stay tuned for our progress on Facebook or our newsletter, and look forward to meeting some of you in person.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Again, you can stay on top of all the latest Preservation New Jersey happenings on our website, preservationnj.org, and on our social medias. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.
Bye, everybody.